You are listening to Written in the Stars, Books and Beyond, where hosts from the LCC Library sit down with writers, publishers, entrepreneurs, and literary enthusiasts of all types. Join us as we explore the very heart of the written word.
Hello and welcome to Written in the Stars. My name is John Szilagyi. With me today is my co-host Amy Ewald.
Hi, everybody.
Today we are talking about art, illustrations, and book design. Our guest is Lucy Synk.
Hello.
Hi. Lucy is an artist with extensive experience who has worked as an artist for large companies and as a freelance artist. She has exhibited work at galleries, at science fiction conventions, at Renaissance fairs, and art fairs kind of all across the country. She published illustrations and book covers in the U.S. and Europe. In addition to her art, she also completed a master's degree in theology from Loyola University in New Orleans, using it to explore her interest in science and faith, feminine spirituality, and fantasy sci-fi as modern myth. So thank you for being here, Lucy.
I'm happy to be here.
So Our podcast kind of really focusing on books. We were going to jump right into talking about kind of your work on books. So what is it like, especially illustrating a book cover?
It can be a very varied experience. And most of my career, I was working with publishers. And it's kind of funny. They don't want you to communicate with the author much. From the publisher's point of view, the book cover is an advertisement. Mm-hmm. So they don't encourage you to read much of the book. That can cause problems. If you ever talk to authors about this, you find out, oh, that doesn't look anything like my character, or you gave away the whole surprise ending of the book. Oh. That didn't happen to me personally, but I talked with Andre Norton once, and she worked very hard on a surprise ending, only to have it revealed.
So
through the cover,
through the book cover.
Maybe you don't know this, but in that case, did the illustrator just guess what was going to happen, or did they have too much knowledge?
The publisher probably gave them a specific scene that the publisher thought would make a good cover, irregardless of what the author might have wanted to do.
So was that the kind of direction that you got from the publisher, is they'd give you a specific scene or some little information?
For commissioned work, very often, if we are lucky, we might be able to read the book ahead of time. Many of my book covers, actually, the publisher liked a piece I had already done that was inspired by the genre. I mentioned Andre Norton already. She inspired me to do, and many other authors, a series of female wizards doing magic. Different portraits of these fantasy characters. So when Tor Books saw one of my illustrations, one of my original paintings, they thought it would be perfect for an anthology of Andre Norton books called Wizards' Worlds, which were all about female wizards. So I really lucked out. I just got paid the licensing fee, and I didn't have to deal with the grind of
Yeah.
Developing something from scratch, right?
From scratch,
yeah.
I've actually done several short story illustrations for magazines, especially Aboriginal science fiction, where I did get to read the short story, and then they had me do like 2 or 3 color illustrations throughout the magazine for it.
Oh, well, that's cool.
So I worked with a little art direction there. I had one particular instance where I did not like the characters in the story, and they all died at the end, and they deserved what they got. So I ended up focusing on their abilities and making almost a surrealistic image, which was really worked out because I got an agent that just showed my work to European publishers, non-English speaking publishers. And one of them loved one of the illustrations and put it on the cover, an anthology of super horror. I don't do horror, but and I can't read the book because it's in German.
So what do you do in that situation? Do you just
Well, they
go-
give me a copy of the cover, and it goes in my resume. And I take my check and cash it.
So you mentioned kind of, I don't know if you would call it a subgenre, that of Aboriginal fantasy or sci-fi. What does that kind of entail, and what is that, I guess, kind of about?
Well, that was a specific name of a specific magazine.
Okay.
And I think their idea is the Aboriginals would be the natives of different planets.
Okay.
So from their point of view, they're the main character.
Okay. That was very different than what I was seeing in my head for a title of that. So that is good to know. The next question I kind of have is, obviously we've been talking a lot about sci-fi and fantasy so far, and that was like a lot of your illustrations are part of that. So what kind of drew you to create sci-fi and fantasy art?
When I was 12, Star Trek came out. Boy, am I dating myself. I got an instant crush on Mr. Spock. I was living in White Cloud, Michigan at the time, a very small town. I think I read every single science fiction book their library had. I just fell in love with science fiction. And then my senior year, the newspaper came out with a double spread about Tolkien, The Lord of the Rings. It was an anniversary. So that got me into fantasy. And when I really got going on my career, it was in the 80s, which we now look back on as the golden age of the science fiction convention. And I had gotten a job at Hallmark Cards, but I was just doing production art. Very technical work that needs a very fine hand, but boring as all get out. And when I realized I might be able to make a living doing what I loved, doing science fiction art, I said goodbye to corporate life and started freelancing.
So so did you just kind of draw on your own then and have your own sketchbooks, or
Oh, yes.
what's your process for that?
Well, I've been drawing my whole life and painting. And I've actually taken classes with individual artists for portraiture and still life to increase my skills, which I then applied to doing illustration work. Growing up in Michigan, I didn't have a chance to get the kind of education you might have in New York or someplace like that. But I adapted all the little bits and pieces of my education and experience and put them together. One of the key parts for my career in Kansas City was that we had one of the largest Renaissance festivals. And through the clubs and through the Renaissance festivals, I had many, many friends who wore costumes. I would invite them to my home where I'd set up a little photography studio. I also had experience in photography. And they would wear their costumes and I would pose them. And indeed, that was like where my Women Wizards series came from, were women wearing costumes, posing for me. I had a whole setup. And then I would use the photography as a reference and sketch it all out and add fantasy elements.
Wow, that's really interesting. You mentioned your education in that, and I did see on your website that you had attended some different community colleges.
Yes.
So, as a community college here at LCC, tell us a little bit about your experience with LCC. In fact, you even mentioned earlier that you had attended. So tell us a little bit about your experience specifically with community colleges, and then your development as an artist.
Well, I love community colleges. After my experience as a 4-year degree, which I loved, but which was not practical in any way. I love that you can, for much more affordable tuition, get very practical learning at a community college that can actually be used for your career. And so Lansing Community College, combined with my fine arts experience, landed me the job at Hallmark Cards. And then later on, much later on, I wanted to get into Photoshop and some of the newer things. I realized that was the direction that the whole industry is going in. So again, I attended community colleges where I was living. One in Champaign, Illinois, another in Grand Rapids. I moved a lot. I don't know if I made it back to LCC or not. But on those occasions, I was focusing on Photoshop, Illustrator, and checking out other things to see if they were a possibility. I even got my toes wet trying some animation. But that was a little over my head, and I came to realize that I couldn't compete with young people who grew up with computers. But I now look on Photoshop as another medium. I love oils, I love acrylics, and I love Photoshop. And it's a great tool now doing illustrations where I can combine elements from paintings I've already done to create a whole new image that will be good for a book cover.
That's so cool. It's like you never quit really learning, right? And experimenting. And
I love learning and experimenting.
yeah, and growing, right? That's
Right.
When we learn, we grow, and we learn new things. And that
Exactly.
That's
yes.
really cool. That's really cool.
You had also mentioned, talking about the 1980s and the golden age of sci-fi conventions. I saw from your website, in your information, you've exhibited art at a bunch of science fiction conventions.
Mm-hmm.
How did you kind of get involved in going to conventions?
Well, my very first two conventions were some of the first Star Trek conventions.
Okay.
I rode the bus with other my schoolmates from Siena Heights to a convention in downtown Detroit, where I met Chekhov.
Oh.
Sulu. And I had little drawings I did at pen and ink of the characters, and they sold, and I got the bug. But then it was quite a while before I found another one at another community college when I moved to Kansas City. One of the largest suburbs is Johnson County, and they have a community college, and they sponsored a literary science fiction convention where I got to meet authors, and I exhibited my art, and it sold. And then I went to other conventions regionally and belonged to a science fiction club, so we were all checking all this stuff out and realized I could do this full time.
Yeah.
Ooh.
The one that really stood out to me is you mentioned WorldCon when it was in
Yes.
Chicago, and you were able to display there. And the reason I know about that is because of the Hugo Awards,
Yes.
which is book awards for sci-fi. What was it like being able to be at that convention and to have your art there at that convention?
It's amazing. A little overwhelming. I was very fortunate. Some of the Golden Age illustrators. Frank Kelly Fries is a very well-known illustrator from the Golden Age. And he was great about giving advice to young, starting up illustrators. And we'd yank him all over the art show to come critique our work. So I got to meet big names, Frank Frazetta, and I've gone blank on a few other ones. But
So I guess my follow-up question would be, what advice was he able to give, and was there anything you would pass along to our listeners and other folks that he told you?
oh, it's been a while.
Yeah.
I
Okay. Yeah. Understandable.
Trying to think of something specific like
Right.
that. Also, that the industry has changed so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think it's not so much like the sci-fi conventions anymore as it's more of the Comic-Con.
Comic-Con.
Yeah.
The conventions, very few of them are still run by fans. They're for-profit now. I can't even afford to attend them like I used to. It's changed so much.
Right. Do you have to have pay some type of fee to have a table?
You have to
and
pay a
things like that?
substantial fee to get in, to have a table. Some of these don't even have art shows. They're all geared only for the media, like the comics and the
Superhero movies.
Exactly. Yeah. They're not interested in artists who might be exhibiting their own work or trying to sell their own work. Yeah. It's unfortunately.
It is unfortunate, yeah. Because it sounds like some of these conventions were kind of an entry for you into the industry.
Well, back then, science fiction was very much an outlier. It was not mainstream. If you wanted to meet other fans, this is where you had to go. And if you wanted to meet professionals like Frank Kelly Freas, like published artists and writers and the publishers themselves, they were very, you could meet them at these conventions. They actually talked to you one-on-one. You could hobnob with them. They would give panels. And I've been on panels myself, giving advice to others how to get published or how to come up with ideas.
Yeah.
And honestly, for me, because I've had a few opportunities like that to meet authors at conventions or other, that was kind of part of my idea for the show, right? Is like to have a podcast where we can have those kinds of conversations that, you might have previously had at conventions in that as well. So it's such a helpful thing to do.
Yes.
Yeah. To change course a little bit here, I noticed on your website, you've also done some murals, and you have a mural at a natural history museum. And tell us a little bit about that specific mural and kind of what it's like to create a piece of art like that.
I had been freelancing as a science fiction artist for about 12 years. Was getting burnt out and was looking more widely afield when I discovered an industry for painting murals and illustrations for natural history museums and nature centers. Now, we didn't work for just one museum. The museums don't really want you to know this. They don't do most of the work themselves. So I was so excited when I discovered this company, and it mentioned that we did not need to know computers. Yay. Because though I was starting to learn, didn't know enough. And that it was mural work for backgrounds, for dioramas at the nature centers and in museums. And all of a sudden I'm looking at this going, dinosaurs. I'll get to paint dinosaurs. And indeed, there's a museum up in Rochester, Illinois, the Burpee Museum. We don't think it's related to the seeds at all.
Okay.
But they had gotten their hands on a young T-Rex skeleton, and they wanted a huge mural of a T-Rex. I got to do the mural. 25 feet tall, 40 feet long, of a T-Rex attacking some other dinosaurs and some Triceratops in the background saying, "Okay, kids, out of the pool. We're out of here." I must have been a pain in the butt to work with right that time, because I was like a 12-year-old for 9 months working on that painting. So that's one of my pride and joys. And you can at least see a reproduction of it still at that museum if you were to go there.
You said
That was for Chase Studios.
You said it took 9 months to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you start? Is that something you do it on paper?
Oh, yes.
First,
Oh,
and
yes.
then, but the scale and how would you?
Well, you need to really work on the anatomy based on the skeletal structures. There's a whole approval process. We know ahead of time the dimensions. So once most of the work, that 9 months, is just planning it all out. Which species? And we were just finding out that some dinosaurs may have had feathers. So I inserted a velociraptor with some feathers on him. Then we do something called gridding it out. It's much too big to project your drawings up. But you make a grid with chalk for 2-foot squares over the entire thing. And then each square, it could be the equivalent, say, of a 1-inch square on your drawing. Mm-hmm. So then, since it's gridded, you're doing it little piece by piece,
right,
to fit the square, making sure the lines fit correctly in each square, so that when you're all done at full size, you've drawn it in the same proportions it was in your drawing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just always fascinated by that. How you go from, a piece of paper or, small scale to such a large scale installation.
When it's that big, a lot of artists would use projectors, but it's too big. You can't.
Yeah.
And you don't want distortions. So the gridding it out makes sure it stays pretty accurate.
Yeah, when you were talking about projectors, I thought, you probably don't want to do that because of distortion. But
Distortions, yeah.
That makes sense.
And one interesting thing is oils was always my favorite medium before. Well, oils are not the right medium for this, and I was never a big fan of airbrush, but we used airbrush for clouds. And we even use those big airless sprayers you can spray paint a house with to get the background sky colors in.